Speak loud.
Alright. Okay, this is Stan Baker, and he is a World War II veteran.
Right.
Okay. So Stan, when did you enter into the World War II?
I entered it, you asked me when I entered the service, on November the 3rd, 1942.
Alright. And when did you get shipped overseas?
I was in the States until the next year. I was shipped between Christmas and New Year to England.
Alright. And you said you went through jungle training?
What's that?
You went through jungle training, you said? You went through training before you went over?
Oh, yes. I was at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and we had our basic training at Seagirt. That was one of their odd camps, you know, where the rifle range was and everything, which, by the way, is, they told us with a great deal of pride that it's the oldest measured rifle range in the United States, Seagirt. George Washington's troops were there. So, with our basic training, Signal Corps training,
Yeah.
I was in the Signal Corps. Well, then we had a week on the rifle range. And very interesting, because I was a shooter from the time I got my first court going. And, well, I'll say it. On the second day, I wore an instructor's band. I'd never been on a formal rifle range before, but I read a lot. I knew what's what. You know. So then we had that. Then basic training lasted a month. Then we were shipped to Athens, Georgia, and to go to radio school. And I can't say how long we were there, maybe about 3 months. That's the place I told you last night on the phone that we sang the wrong song when we were marching at. See, those days I used to sing. Not when you marched formally, but when you marched at route step, you're just marching. Some guy would start singing that was good at it. Pretty soon the whole group was singing. So we sang Marching Through Georgia. And we were informed the next day that we should never do that again in Georgia. See, that was a Civil War song. And I guess I attended radio school about 3 months. Then I was shipped to Drewfield, Florida. And the training outpost there was at Bradenton, Florida, right on the Gulf. And then I was assigned to a radar outfit. So, the first thing we were told was, don't be coming in the orderly room and asking for furloughs because there aren't any. Radar, police have it now, every police car, I guess.
Yeah.
Radar was so secret, we couldn't even write home about it. See, and so there I was at Drewfield, well, at Bradenton, and I was on active duty then for several months on the West Coast, they called it. When you're in Florida, you see these signs on the West Coast that says, some guy said it looks like we're in California. I was on the West Coast to watch the Gulf of Mexico for subs, German subs or sub activity or Japanese subs. But nothing turned up like that, except severe thunderstorms, and we were in pup tents.
So, what countries were you in when you were overseas?
First I went over on the Queen Mary, which was one of the two queens ships of Great Britain. They were luxury liners. And I think they told us they were for 1,400 passengers. There was 22,000 on when I was on it. And on the third, you have the top deck where the staterooms are. Then you have A, B, and C deck. I think I was on C deck anyhow. This is a room about half as big as this part right here. And in there they had put in 9 bunks. And there were 2 guys to a bunk. You took turns. You had a buddy. One night you slept on the deck, and the next night you slept in the bunk. It took 5 days to go over because they went at full speed. And we got in some terrific storms, like there was listing gauges that we listed to 30 degrees, which is pretty much, you know, because they didn't dare to run the gyroscope. Nazi subs, the captain explained all this on the PA system. Nazi subs could pick up this sound. And we were not in the convoy. They had anti-aircraft guns, but we were unarmed. He said, we rely on speed. So he said, don't fall overboard. He said, we'll throw a life preserver over, but he said, that's it. So in 5 days we arrived at Gorrock, Scotland. And just like here in the States, well, when I was shipped from there, I was shipped up to, I can't think of the camp, I was there for a week, with deep snow on the ground from Florida. And we were up there for a week, and I got to go to the USO and all that you don't hear about now. They sang songs about it on the radio all the time. And we got to Gorrock, so the ship had to stop 4 miles from shore because the water was too shallow in his harbor, and they transported us in smaller ships. So when we got in there was a whole lot of Scottish lassies, complete with kilts and the whole thing, to welcome us over there with food. And then I went from there by train down into the lower part of England at Twyford on Berks. In England, there's so many towns that there's the name of the town on. That's the stream it's on. There was a stream there, Twyford on Berks. So then there I was. And I was there more than a month. And then we were shipped up into the northern part of Scotland to set up a big early warning radar set that could reach to Europe and cover all of France and all that. I helped to set that up. When we came back, when the invasion was, so I was assigned to the USS Henrico. We were standby radio operators. There was 40 or 50 of us. Our mail was all censored. The first, well, I was on that ship for 6 weeks. So then we were given an APO address. I mean an NPO address. Navy address. My mother kept writing to me and saying, are you in the Navy? I answered, but that was crossed out, you know, when it was censored, see ya. And there was APO, Army Post Office, and NPO, Navy Post Office. So I was aboard this, and we'd go out for training every day. Mostly they had these small landing craft, personnel landing craft that they'd practice running, they'd put them overboard. Now sometimes I'd have a pass, and I was going to town, and the ship would go out, and I'd get on it when I come back. And All the times the guys said, you know, after we were on it, about 5 weeks, the first division came aboard. So the guys said, now we'll go. Well, we left the next morning, but it was another practice run. Just for them to practice climbing down these rope riggings. So then, a few days later, we were called in, everybody, and whatever money we had, English money we had, which I never did learn to understand, because they use the English system. Believe me, the metric system that we use is better, it's in tens.
Yeah.
I got to France, I didn't know anything, except I could say no compris. If a Frenchman talked to me, you know, I said no compris, that means no comprehend, you know. I learned to use the money right away, because it's in tens, in decimals of tens. The franc, okay. And the same when I got to Germany, we had our money exchange again. So our money was exchanged. I said to my buddy, I said, I think when we go out for this practice run tomorrow, I think it's going to be the real thing. You never saw so many ships, I'm sure of that. And, but we were a standby, there was 50 of us from my outfit sent there. We were a standby crew, and they didn't need us. This was in case of the radio stations that were on other ships, in case one of them would get sunk or whatever, then we'd be have to get on duty. So from the radio room, I could go up on the deck and I could see the shore, see France. And so after they were all unloaded, we returned to England. I believe the next day. And then I crossed the English Channel. I was also a ground observer. You know, could identify planes. I crossed the English Channel 4 or 5 times. And I could tell you millions of things. It was interesting. It was interesting in England. The people didn't have much to eat. They were glad if they had a GI friend. See if you. So I was keeping company with a young lady in England. And if you wanted to, you could go to the best sergeant and get food to take to them. Special food that they didn't get otherwise. But anyhow, so I was never in combat. So finally we went to Germany, and Darmstadt was the one city I was in. Darmstadt was ruined. The only thing at the edge of the city, the swimming pool was okay. It was 35,000. I was, by the way, then I was attached to the 9th Air Force. See, after that stint on the USS Enrico, Darmstadt, 38,000 people were killed there in one day. See, the way I was in the 9th Air Force, and then there was the 8th U.S. Air Force. So before that, Darmstadt would get bombed occasionally, because the English knew that it was a defense, the whole thing was a big defense plan. But only at night. See, they bombed from night. Finally one day, now this we were all told, the 8th Air Force got operating there, and they bombed it in the daytime, when all these people that lived and camped and everything in the country during the night, when it would be bombed by the British, were in their shops working, and in the defense plants. and there were 38,000 people killed there. The streets were rubble higher than his house, you know. Oh, I saw one wall standing, just the wall of a building, a brick wall, and about on the fourth floor, there was a bathtub hanging by the plumbing. But then the engineers came along and blasted that down, you know. So, we were stationed at, I was stationed at Wiesbaden, Germany for a while, and then other places. Sometimes a few of us had to go to a place where they needed ground observers or a radio operator, but I didn't get to do much radio operating in Germany. And I was never in combat. A few times we were strafed, you know, and then which almost everybody was. So, finally the war was over in Germany. Then we were on the gravy train. We had nothing to do. See, they kept sending men over, recruits, and we had nothing to do because they wanted us to re-enlist when we get home. We'd be there. They sent all kind of sporting goods over, baseball equipment and that, so you could amuse yourself. That's where I first learned to shoot archery. They sent archery tackle over. And we'd look over quite a ways, like over across the golf course, and you'd see these guys that just came over doing close order drill and doing combat runs and everything. And because they still brought them over for the occupation, see. So we were scheduled to go to Japan in the fall, and then the war ended in Japan. So then we came home by seniority. So I came home on it was called the George B. Wood, the ship I came home on. It had been, they had a history there posted inside. It had been a German ship that they found in good condition, Windhoek. So they took it over and they named it after General George B. Wood. So I came home and now I know the place we went to in New York where the deep snow was, Camp Shanks. Okay, we came home and we were at Fort Dix. And then they told us, they said you'll be discharged in 12 days. Oh, when we got off the ship, it was about 9 o'clock in the evening. And we were carrying our baggage bags. We brought our rifles and all along. We were carrying our baggage bags and everything. We got out in this big field, and I'll never forget that. And we were told to set them down. And they said, when you see them again, they'll be in your barracks. They had a lot of German prisoners there to work. And you could win a place in German prisoners. The whole big room full had these ironers, you know, would press your clothes if you wanted and all that stuff. And so some major, I think it was, jumped up in the back of a truck and had a PA system. And there were several thousand of us, you know. He said, how many guys would like to eat steak? And everybody yelled. How many would like to drink milk? Okay, he said, now it's almost midnight. He said, you're gonna go to the mess hall. And he said, if you want to stay there and eat till tomorrow morning, it's okay. They told us we'd be home in 12 days. Nobody believed that. Because overseas, when you were told you'd be somewhere in so many days, it never worked out. You know.
Yeah.
We were only there a few days, and then I was at Indians on Gap. And there you were interviewed in different offices. You go around. Won't you consider re-enlisting? Now, the war was over in Japan, but they still want you to re-enlist. See, that time it was all draft. I remember when the draft started, I wasn't old enough. The draft was for 1 year. And in Killinger, Leroy Chubb, do you know Janet? Her husband. He was one, did you know Herman Herb? They lived back on Hoy Road. In fact, he got married there. They were the two draftees selected from our area of Killinger. And they were drafted for a year, see? So there was a song on radio all the time, I'll be back in a year, little darling. Uncle Sam has called and I must go. And sure enough, they came home at the end of the year for about, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks. Well, then my father took a charge in, out in Clearfield County, Troutville, PA. Why it was named Troutville, I never figured out. There was no stream there. And there I was until I was drafted. Only out there the people didn't say drafted. They said, did you get your greetings? Did you get your greetings yet? See, when you got your notice, it said greetings from the president. You were asked to represent your country in the armed forces. And like I said in the beginning, Leroy Chubb and Herman Herbert, those guys, they were drafted for a year, and then they were only home to about 6 weeks for that change. My greeting said you were drafted for the duration of the war plus 6 months. So it turned out about like that. When the war was over in Japan, I came home in December the 11th of 45. Now, when people were drafted, if you worked on a farm, you could get a deferment. And there was, you know, the Army was huge. And women were working in the defense plants already before I left. In fact, there was a popular song I remember now going on the radio, Rosie the Riveter. Did you ever hear that one? Rosie the Riveter. There was always a refrain, Rosie the Riveter. And the defense plants were loaded where they made tanks and all that. My father had bought a 41 Ford. There were no 42s. They all went to the armed forces, a few they made from parts. And there were no 43s. If you ever wonder why you don't see a 43 model automobile, he didn't make any. And when I came home in 45, they started to convert. A few people in Millersburg got new ones. But I know different ones run the waiting list. See, like Trotman's or somebody, Kurt McLaughlin, or anybody got a car, why, the first person on the list got it. So I bought an old junker. Tom Arnold that worked in the drugstore, he was on the list, he got a new car. So I bought his Chrysler 36 Royal for $200. Think of it. And think of this, that had changed hands so many times during the war because young fellas bought it, their first car, and then right after that they were drafted. This is the honest truth. It had an H title.
Well, that's good enough for.
So, well, you know, I could tell you all kinds of incidents, but like I told you last night, there were war songs. When I went to Killinger School, we had songbooks. You know, you were never in a country school like the one little red schoolhouse. We had one mechanical device, a pencil sharpener. We had a piano. And when I think about this, out at the coal in the wood house, you know, it was a hand-fired big heater in the corner. Out there we had an axe to cut the wood. Now if a kid gets caught in school with a penknife in his pocket, he's in trouble. At those days, if you didn't have one, you were some kind of an oddball. There was no problem. Yeah, there were problems. I cut myself. A couple guys cut themselves at times. You know, instead of using a pencil sharpener, they sharpened it. In fact, my mother told me when she was a girl and went to school, country school, the girls liked the fellows best that were good at sharpening pencils. They even had no pencil sharpeners. That's how things have changed.
Yeah.
You know, and oh, before I went into service, I was one of the lucky ones, I guess, west of State College there. What's the name of that town? It's Port Royal. There the line was. From there down here all the way to the coast, gas was rationed. So when I was drafted, I had a week off, and a guy living across the street from me, we came down to Millersburg to see Marvin Myers, my buddy, and everybody down here had these ration stickers on the windshield, A, B, or C. If you had an A sticker, you got 5 gallons a week. You could buy. Out there you could buy all you wanted. In fact, some places they were burning it. See, it was not to save gas like people think now. It was to save rubber, tires. I firmly believe that God helped us. See, our rubber came from places like Sumatra and those places which the Japs had taken over, and there was none. And then we got this, they called it ersatz rubber. You know, this is what we have now. And by the way, the tires now are much better than the real rubber tires. As soon as you had those and they were exposed to the sun, the sidewalls would crack. They'd be all cracked and everything. And the other thing was, for a while I was attached to the 101st Airborne. I didn't jump, I was just attached for what I could do. And when they jumped, they'd hit the silk, but they didn't hit the silk. All silk came from Japan. They hit the nylon, and just at the right time, we got nylon. Did you ever hear of that? Mm-mm. Just at the right time, we got the, what do you call artificial rubber? Anyhow, that's what we have. See, our rubber now don't come from rubber trees. It's not rubber. Rubber bands they had in school, pretty soon they were all full of cracks and everything. So we got this, what they couldn't produce the tires fast enough. Oh, here's something I can tell you about the war. So when my unit was ready to come home, well, you turned in your vehicles. You had to take them to I don't know how far our drivers took them. I never drove anything overseas, but they had to take them to a big grounds where they kept them. And you know what a Humvee is?
Yeah.
Well, we had trucks like that. They'd send along. So when it got to this place and parked them where they were supposed to be, they could take the wheels off and bring them along back to put on other ones. And those 6x6s, they were called, that was a standard GI truck. It had two sets of duals in the back and front wheel drive. Many and many a time you'd see them going by from other units that were turning them in. And in the back, there were no wheels on the one axle. It was chained up so that they could run it. They were empty, just run it on the two. And a lot of times the unit would send I know our unit sent they were like a Humvee, what do we call it? 4x6, they were called. Don't ask me why. But they'd send those along to bring wheels back. That's how close it was. And if we wouldn't have got artificial rubber, we'd have been out of luck. And they sang, we'd sing when we were marching. Some songs I shouldn't sing here. We'd march, the officers would ride in jeeps, and we'd march at route step and separated. The thing you learn to do is not bunch up in case you get strafed. One song we sang, they'd sing this over and over. Sometimes we'd be on both sides of the road, moving up, marching. And a whole mess of trucks would go through, empty. And we used to sing, I thought this was a mechanized war, parlez-vous. See, that was copied after our fathers, what they sang in France, parlez-vous.
Mm-hmm.
And we sing, I thought this was a mechanized war, parlez-vous. I thought this was a mechanized war, so what in the hell are we marching for? This stuff you don't hear all that. And then we'd all sing, the second lieutenants are at it again, parlez-vous. Second lieutenants are at it again, parlez-vous. Second lieutenants are at it again, winning the war with a fountain pen. You know what a fountain pen is? We didn't have ballpoints those days.
Yeah.
They didn't care. I guess some of them didn't like it, but I can tell you something about the war. The Germans, I watch these programs on TV, and you see how they're marched and how they're dressed. We couldn't believe it. But I can tell you one reason that they lost the war. They dressed like that right to the end. That's how the officers' uniforms were. Their pilots had milk to drink and school children didn't have any because their pilots needed it. And he had very good pilots, by the way. And they would, officers that I saw that were captured, I was right close sometimes to combat, and they brought it back. We couldn't believe their uniforms. See, the uniforms we got when we were over, Ike jackets, they call them, Eisenhower, okay. And then we wore fatigue clothes when we were working. Well, the Germans, all the officers wore those same clothes all the time. The emblems on them, their insignias and that, were embroidered, probably had to be by hand. And I didn't get to examine any German fighter planes clothes, but I did other ones that I looked at. And the guys came back and told me they can't believe it. Our fighter planes at the end of the war, inside were plain. Everything that was necessary was there. But the tubing and everything that run along the inside was just fastened with rivets, to the side and everything.
Yeah.
The German fighter planes, the last ones they made, were just like at the beginning of the war. Inside everything was luxury. See, they admired the Air Force, which was under Goering. And the Army in Germany kept that up right to the end. See, our pants, they didn't get iron or anything, and they had no creases. Oh, that's the first thing when we got back to the Indian Town Gap. We went in a place with old German prisoners working there, and we all got new uniforms to wear home. There were German prisoners that were pressing, and that was something I could tell you that I think helped us to win the war. And the German vehicles had to be that. And the officers had to have a lot of attendance and everything. All officers, I'll give them credit, some of them were like that. But believe me, when it came time to dig foxholes, they could work themselves. They could pray too. Like they used to say, maybe you never heard that saying. There was all kinds of sayings. There's no atheists in foxholes. Sometimes we were in places we dug foxholes, but we didn't need them then. But we were in them. I spent a lot of time, one time 6 weeks straight in pup tents. That you carried a pack, then when you took it apart, that was half of the pup tent. They're about this high. You fasten them together. Two guys slept in one. You fasten them, they were long enough, and there were all kind of interesting experiences. There in Florida, when I was at the Gulf Coast, that was on active duty watching for subs. We were in pup tents. So one morning when they called us, to get up regularly, one guy didn't get up. So they went to check it out. He wasn't moving. We had sleeping bags, He was lying in his sleeping bag, and there was a rattlesnake coiled up on the middle of it. So they had to get it off of there. Oh, you wouldn't believe how many rattlesnakes were in the jungle. See, we all had blank cartridges for signaling. If you just take your rifle and hold it out this way, move the muzzle a little, the snake will fall out. Pow! That's the end of him. And all other kinds of things. We used to go on 30-mile hikes, Florida. And every hour you'd have a 10-minute break. I often think about this. One of the times there was a road going through an orange grove. Everybody filled up their canteens off those trees. By the way, the oranges we see here in the store aren't ripe. When an orange is ripe, I pull them off the tree. You just shove your thumb through it. I wish I could do that now. Or squeeze it in your canteen.
Well,
it was I guess I could talk all night. Because there are a lot of things come to my mind I don't think of then. Didn't think of then. But in England I never did learn to use the money. And in Scotland I could hardly understand them. I read that our country is thinking about going on a metric system. In my opinion, it can't be soon enough. The metric system is so simple. When I got to France, I understood it. you know, once in a while he could buy something. And in Germany, then we had the marks, and they were in tens. And it was real simple, and I think we should do that.
Yeah.
If am I talking too long?
No.
I'll tell you about the metric system a little bit that I learned over there. See over here, if a student comes out of the schoolhouse door, so you say to him, how many yards in half a mile? He'll look at you kind of funny and keep on going. You go over in Europe and you ask a student, how many meters in half a kilometer? And he'll say 500. That's how simple it is. That I gotta give you credit for that. But that's what our money is.
Yeah.
See, they say that some students do so well in Europe, well, they don't have the fractions.
Yeah.
See, you can almost do it in your head.
Well, I think we got enough.
You gonna go?
Yeah, I think we're done with the video. We have enough
Well, why don't
information.
you think
Well,
about
is there
that?
anything that you wanted to know that I could tell you?
Well, I asked you everything I need to ask you. That was all of it.
Yeah, I was in Clearfield County. I'll give myself credit. Well, this is social. When I was drafted, when I came off from work, I worked in the mines. When I came off from work, then we took showers, you know, and everything. That's the time when a shower feels good, when you're black. Even have cold dirt in your boots. Anyhow, they said Mr. Thomas wants to see Tommy Thomas. He was superintendent after you take your shower. So I told my buddy that I rode with, I said, we had 4 miles from where Troutville to where I worked. Then after I got on the man trip, I had 4 miles underground to where I worked. But anyhow, Mr. Thomas went to see you. See, I had received my greetings already. He said, I found out that you're going to be drafted. I said, yes, I am. You know, they had this big paneled office, everything. And well, he said, I can get you a 6-month deferment. And he said, my buddy and I pulled pillars is what we did. It was hard to get guys to do that. He said, I'll give you a 6-month deferment. He said, I don't know how long this war will last, but he said, I believe I can get you deferments for the duration of the war. I said, Mr. Thomas, I said, if I take a deferment, I'll be the only guy 20 years old in Troutville. Everybody was going. That was interesting. I get to talking about here. Saturday night I used to go to square dances. You should have seen this, so maybe you should have. There was young ladies, 28, 30, you know, and the guys were all under 20, over 20 or under, and a lot of them were dancing with guys that were 16. I guess they would have never looked at them in the normal times, but there were no young men around. They were gone, except the ones that were deferred. Now, I could have had a deferment there, but I decided not to take it. I didn't like to be drafted. I went hunting the day before. I'll never forget when we came to our car in the late afternoon, woodcock were in already. Right beside the front wheel, a woodcock took off. They got him, that was the last. And I saw the cathedral at Salisbury and some of the big cathedrals in London, and a lot of things that I wouldn't get to see otherwise. And the sort of Queen Mary now, you understand this was playing. See, now the mess hall I ate in, the floor sloped, because that was one of the swimming pools inside. And when you looked up at the ceiling, it was all murals and paintings. And like I said, we slept one night on the deck and then one night in your bunk.
Mm.
I think the rooms were about as big as from here to the wall, maybe about that long. The cabins, they call them. That was for 2 people.
Oh, there's your phone.